All right, welcome to Pete Monfre Tells the Truth. We're every Thursday at 11 o'clock Central. Here we are on LinkedIn, and we tell the truth, which is almost unheard of. Today, our topic is the challenge of selling expertise, which is actually one hell of a challenge. We're going to be talking about, the general perception of what a consultant is and what they do and how clients can kind of, really leverage them to get the value out like wringing a sponge, which is okay with me. You got to get your value from it. So who am I? I'm Pete Monfre. I'm a B2B marketing strategist. I've been continually doing this work as a consultant. Oh, there's that. I get a bad taste in my mouth when I say the word, but since 1990 with BC, which is actually before computers, and all these kind of fancy media outlets have written about me at one time or another using $10 words and that sort of thing. So I'm easy to find and I'm a little bit hard to get a hold of, but I hope you'll try, and we'll put some links in the comments to help. So today I am joined by Paul Fioravanti, which, did I get that right? Was I
Yes, you did.
close?
Perfect.
Vianti. I actually didn't. I was a little off, but it's T. And I should get it right because we're both Sicilian in descent, if I recall.
No, my family's from four different places in Italy, but
Oh, all right.
we're all over the place. But um, we are full-blooded Italian, and the reason that we have short first names is because nobody can ever pronounce our last name.
Ah, I see. Right. You got to have the go-to for the folks, right? Um, and also it's in the Bible, definitely. So close enough. Well, I like to start off the show being ill-informed. That's kind of a thing that we do. I don't know where the bell is that we ring for that, but I ended up with a French name actually, and I think France used to exile criminals to Sicily, and that's how that worked. But I don't know that for sure. But Paul is a real life Harvey Keitel. He's a fixer, kind of like me. He steps in as a CEO, COO, CRO, probably a few more letters too. I think of him as the turnaround kid. So, welcome. You've been doing this for a lot of years, and I thought you'd be a great person to talk to about what it's like to sell expertise.
Well,
Vapor.
thanks for having me, Peter. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I will certainly do my best to answer any questions you have and try to shed light on the topic. But selling expertise is certainly not the easiest thing in the world. I think, with respect to selling anything intangible, it's always
Right.
challenging to, lay out features and benefits and return on investment, all that kind of stuff. But there are definitely some challenges that come up when you're the person that, or you're the team in some cases, that is asked to come in and fix a situation, whether it's a kind of a rapid uh, turnaround or transformation, or it's a more elongated engagement. But it's definitely a challenge.
Well, and I think there's a number of different challenges. I think one of them is, and again, doing this for so long, I've almost seen an entire industry go a cycle. It's there's a growing cynicism, and it's not just towards marketing people. It really is towards the consultant class, I would call them, and there's a lot of erroneous beliefs around it, and then there's things that are true. There, you mentioned right before the program went on about how COVID created a lot of insta consultants. Just add unemployment and they thrive. Then they get a job and they disappear on the client. Paul and I are lifers, so but one challenge is there's a cynicism there because that's what they're accustomed to. I mean, what do you think the perception is with clients or potential clients? A lot of what we'll talk about is in the sales cycle. You know, Once they're clients, hopefully you can deliver some value.
Yeah, I think it's a great question. Again, when you do what I do or what we do, you realize rather quickly that no two situations are the same. And I think I'm on 82 engagements in 35 industries, 36 industries. So it's a constant uh, relearning, and you have to be a very quick learner. But you start to see patterns But one of the traps that you cannot fall into as an advisor or a consultant is to think that, company C looks like company B or A just because it has some of the markers of a prior engagement that you might have been on. And they're all
Sure.
unique and different. And every industry thinks it's unique and special, but there are a lot more common denominators than I think people realize. But to your point, one of the biggest challenges is, having them let you in the door and admitting that they have a problem that needs diagnosis and treatment. And it may be that the marketing is bad or non-existent. It may be that in the case of most turnarounds, the financial and operating results are negligent or have fallen off a cliff. Um,
Right.
there are lots of failure factors, but generally it's always failure is always behavioral. And I will tell you one common denominator issue, and I don't know why this is, and this goes across small businesses, publicly held companies, private equity owned businesses, et cetera, that a common failure factor is just not shining the light on the importance of sales and marketing. I was a CEO of a global pharmaceutical company that had over 2,000 employees. And to my astonishment, they had a sales force of 3 people. And it was really a board level failure. They were sort of skeptical or cynical of the role of salespeople or marketing people. They did not want to invest in nurturing the brand, or in the case of this company, a contract manufacturer. The only way you survive is by selling capacity. And the only way you sell capacity is by having somebody that sells capacity. Uh,
Right.
it just didn't make any sense that they would understaff that function, but they've continued to do that since I turned the business around 3 years ago.
Right.
Uh,
You're saying that, they've got an expensive bag of meat, who's pushing a solution out into the market, maybe a whole team of meat bags, and it does work. But if they did put attention on some of those other things, you'd really reduce your cost of acquisition a lot. I mean, it's like
yeah,
it works, but it's probably the most expensive, slowest, least efficient way to go to market. Um, but the matter that it does work, I think, you know, that's why the other ones, I think they don't get a lot of respect in the boardroom. Branding, marketing, these kinds of things, and for some companies, especially industrial companies, branding kind of is less important than in say a consumer company. Um, but what really speaks to me is that you've got the underpinnings of your knowledge, across different industries, but also usually, I don't really work outside of industries where I haven't worked before. So,
okay.
you know what I mean? I focus on industry. So we know how it works. We know how, your business model works. We know a lot going in, but there is so much, this sheer amount of information. I think all consultants do discovery. And,
Yes.
it's a million and one questions and everyone hates doing it. But those are
Usually
not to
the
learn about the company. That's to get the detail about that specific company.
It's kind of like the analogy I use. It's like when a homeowner hires a tradesman to come in and work on the house. They're going to give him a speech that, well, we need some painting done. It's really not that bad. Or the septic tank, even though it's bubbling up, it's really not that bad. And commonly, you get from management teams, owners, or boards of directors is, we need somebody for 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, and then you get in there and you do the first to your point, you do the first 30 day deep dive and you start to compile essentially a punch list of what has to be addressed or
Right.
remedied. And then they
Gaps.
realize it's much worse than they thought. In a recent example, um, this is a relatively small company that I'm working on. No one had looked at pricing and costing, and we just did a Pareto analysis or a sort of the top 10 sold products, and they realized that 9 of the top 10 best-selling products they lost money on over the last 5 years because not only was their costing wrong in their ERP system, but the pricing to the market was wrong because their assumptions were wrong. So essentially, it was millions of dollars of margin shift from what should have been millions of dollars of gross margin to substantial losses, and that's
Yeah.
only the top 10 SKUs.
Well, to me, it's if we really boil it down, it's a poor decision-making process that had faulty information going in, then a whole bunch of decisions are made, and then a whole bunch of money gets lost. I mean, I think that's the pattern that I see on, in my end of the world, which is companies investing in marketing programs and either not knowing, they don't know if it's working or not, or they're just unhappy. And it seems like everybody's unhappy. And I do track it to kind of a rash of people claiming expertise. I mean, what kinds of things should a client look for to vet a potential expert that they might be bringing in?
I think what's important is to find somebody that is not just between jobs or sort of looking for an interim gig, and
But look at
focus
their
on somebody.
history.
Yeah, look at what they've worked on, have them give you references and milestones. But again, there's no substitute for a lot of experiences in a lot of industries and a lot of situations with a lot of stakeholders. And you can't get that. I see a lot of people that try to transition. They may have, early retired out of a company that they worked for 25 or 30 years. And the pitch is, I have 25 years of industry experience. No, you don't. You have 25 one-year experiences that, also have to be sort of discounted because you're only in one industry. You might have only been in one department working with the same people. So your breadth and your experience is very limited. And it also constrains the ability to see objectively. I'm thinking of, several circumstances that I've been in where management, a board, just again, department managers, supervisors, they come at it from the standpoint of kind of limited range or myopia because that's all they know, right? And if you take somebody that has limited industry expertise in manufacturing, for example, now you put them in a different industry, it's a different set of manufacturing challenges, right? So
Right.
what's acceptable in one industry, for example, medical devices, aerospace, medicine in general, that's a different level of scrutiny and compliance than you would find in a company that's stamping out zinc washers, right? Not
Sure.
that there's anything wrong with zinc washers, but
No offense to the zinc washer
every
people.
industry has its bar. That's right. No offense to the
Yeah, I
zinc
mean,
bar.
boy, those guys are, they'll write letters, those people.
This is true.
You know what, though? You're getting at the heart of something I think that's really, really important. And it's, what is the definition of expertise? And, you acquire it over time, but there's this concept let me see if I can get it really boiled down. You're talking about somebody who, let's say they've been with a company for 20 years, 25 years. And ask them, how many operations plans have you done in your entire career adult life?
Yeah.
4, 2, 3, 30. Let's say they did one every year and maybe twice on Sunday. An experienced consultant who usually is hair challenged and probably looks a little older. The idea is that we're at thousands. And so you mentioned pattern recognition. That's what I think one of the real values of the true expert is. They can take a relatively small data set, means less expensive, and quickly see a pattern because we've seen it before. I sometimes pray that someone actually brings me a problem I haven't seen before, but that's the difference, right? And it's not to take away from the client, because that's another challenge, is it takes a confident leader to bring in expertise. If you're a petty little insecure dude or lady or something else, you're really less inclined to do it. I think that's another big barrier, is insecurity on the part of the prospect or the client. So, but that's the distinction. It's Really, seriously, we're not trying to be mean, but how many times have you done this? We've done it a
Oh,
whole lot,
yeah, I've done it a whole lot. Like I said,
a
on
ridiculous amount.
over 82 engagements. So I should give you a little bit of background on my firm. So Corval was
Please.
founded it was founded in 1996 by Jim Malone. Jim passed away in 2021. He was my partner and mentor, and I don't think anyone else has his track record. But Jim was CEO of 6 Fortune 500 companies. He was advisor to 2 U.S. presidents. Sat on 3 public company boards. And Jim was the most humble guy you'd ever meet. Just a super logical Midwestern down home values kind of individual. And he taught me a lot in the 11 years that I spent with him. But there are 2 things that stand out in particular that relate to your question. And the first is, he used to say this repeatedly: you go into a new engagement and you're essentially uncovering things. Like you talked about the discovery process. You're essentially turning the rocks over. You're getting objective information. And I always use the term objective perspective because it's what the organization needs at that moment in time in order to truthfully and accurately execute in the future. But what's important, or what's a risk to the advisor in that early phase, is there's a skepticism about bringing in an outsider. And we've all, those of us that do this for a living, we've all heard the pejorative terminology and the slants. A consultant is somebody that borrows your watch and tells you what time it is, all that kind of stuff.
Well,
And
they tell you what you already know. That's another fallacy that I hear often.
well,
No, yeah, the bad
not
ones might
accurate though,
maybe.
because you don't already know it. But Jim used to talk about shining the light on failure, right? And nobody wants to have that light
Ouch.
shining on failure. And the truth is sometimes, again, I think in a lot of the corners of advisory and consulting work, what's missed is the importance of the role of governance. And I'm working on engagement right now. I happen to be working with an excellent board, and not all boards are as great as this one. Not all boards are excellent. I've worked with some terrible directors. One of the worst ones was, one of the directors on the pharma company. I mean, the guy would just, if you had said the sky is blue, he would say the sky is yellow, just to be contrarian. But so shining the light on failure is a thing, and sometimes the failure is the directors, right? Or it's the CEO, or it's the owner. And the
It's
other thing that
personal.
Jim would talk about was culture.
Mm-hmm.
And one of Jim's best quotes was, "Culture is determined by the worst behavior that the organization tolerates." And if you think about that, bad behavior or poor performance becomes your baseline. It becomes your accepted default reality, right? That becomes the
Right.
foundational level of the business. It's sort of the, if you think about if you're buying flood insurance, right? If you bought a policy from FEMA, they would ask you, are you in the 100-year floodplain, which is the worst thing that's happened in the last 100 years, right?
Right.
And organizations have their own floodplains where, they've not been prepared. They've had some quasi-catastrophic event, which sometimes is just bad management. But again, a lot's been written about culture. A lot has been written about emotional intelligence. And in my world, EQ is more important than IQ. And what you see commonly in private equity space is there's a lot of egoism. There's a lot of shallow experience. There's a lot of, if you were in Texas, they would say, big hat, no cattle. Because
Yes.
somebody happened to check the box on the right school or whatever. But there's no substitute for experience. And I have cleaned up after CEOs that checked all the boxes, went to the finest schools, were military officers in some cases. And I've seen better CEOs that were high school dropouts because they were more aligned with the goals of the business, and they've been more aligned with common sense. So
Absolutely.
you have to take the ego out of the equation. And the ego becomes a barrier to letting in outside advice or influence. So if they
Right.
think they know everything, they're not going to accept the result or the advice. And one
Well,
of the things we say all the time is everybody wants an advisor, nobody wants the advice.
well, what comes to mind is the saying that, you never want to be the smartest guy in the room. And if
Right.
you are somebody who isn't, it's not just a saying, it's your philosophy of what you do. In my case, whether it's, in my companies, I always want to surround myself with people better, smarter, faster than me. And, it's a tenet of good leadership. But if you're very egotistical, it's either going to be really hard, but a lot of people still do it, or you'll never do it. And the story that comes to mind for me is, and I've just recently got in touch with an old friend and mentor who really was there, a guy named Bill Lowell, who I believe will be on the program at some point here coming up. But he was, I was a very young guy, and I had a very strappy young marketing agency that was kind of growing fast. And honestly, it was over my head. And I had the insight, even at my mid 30s, to be like, hey, I don't know everything. Let's bring people in. And I would credit him very much for, that company ultimately being a multi-million-dollar company. But if I was so egotistical that I thought I knew everything, that would have never, ever happened.
And that comes with aging as a manager too. I think as you mature and you work with more people cumulatively over your career, you appreciate different perspectives, and you come at it from the standpoint of, what can I learn today, not what can I preach today. And
Right.
collecting objective information is critical for any analysis and any execution, because and this program is about truth. I respect that. One of the greatest
We tell it.
monologues or dialogues is, Jack Nicholson in A Few Good Men and his Nathan Jessup, and just the acting is like so precise. But I mean, it's everywhere. It's ubiquitous. But you can't handle the truth line, and not everybody can accept that. And
Yeah.
again, because it comes with culpability, and I think a mature management culture will realize that we all make mistakes. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody is culpable, but it's how you learn from it and move on. And it's not about personal blame. It's about personal accountability and shifting and transforming. And the number one goal is doing what's best for the business and its stakeholders. And sometimes
Right.
that goal is not in alignment with what the goals of management or what the goals of governance may be.
Well, and I think that there's a real fear there that, I actually think that something you mentioned earlier, well, and by the way, I appreciate, you've been very blunt. I mean, it's like, hey, it's kind of harsh. The reality is, but here's the thing, the perception that the consultant is there to make you look bad. I think that's one of the big fears, that they're going to make you look bad. A good consultant really wants to be invisible, wants to be in the background, has got your back, right? Who supports, you. And, the bad ones, I think when people think of consultants in general, they're really actually thinking of bad consultants.
Well, I'll give you an example. So we had a client come to us in 2017 that was just going through a layer cake of hell. The business was struggling. She was having, things going on in her personal life, had just lost her dad, was going through a divorce, like literally all the bad planets had aligned around the sun at that moment in time. And Jim and I met with her, and we literally just said to her, whether you engage us or not, whether you hire us or not, the first thing that you need to realize is that all storms pass, this too shall pass, and you are going to be fine. If you engage us, we will certainly help you get to a moment of fine in your business. And she trusted us to do some objective analysis on the business. And fast forward, so 5 years later, the business more than doubled in size. The earnings went up by a multiple of 8. She turned it into a public company. They had rapid growth even through COVID. They had one of the highest retail direct-to-consumer return on ad spend metrics on social media. And I'm not taking credit for that, but the credit belongs to that individual, that owner and CEO,
Absolutely.
because she dropped the ego. She realized she needed help. And her greatest strength, and I tell her this all the time, she could run a $1 billion company just as easily as a $15 or $20 million company. But her greatest strength is high EQ and the ability to raise the hand and say, I need some help, and here's why. And again, consultants and advisors and professionals, whether it's a marketing firm, whether it's a law firm, a tax person, a turnaround advisor, management consultant, the guy painting your house, the guy cutting your lawn, they're all there, the goal of helping you make things better. And often that's an interim impact, but it has lasting results. And again, I'm certainly not taking credit for anything the firm has done. But if I look back at CoreVal's history, there are hundreds of engagements that had a ripple effect, continue to have a ripple effect of positive earnings, strong EBITDA, satisfied employees. And our name, CoreVal, comes from core values. And Jim laid those core values out: profit, growth, and fun. By the way, he has a book. We have his book coming out probably in early 23 at this point. But Jim's book really kind of zeroes in on the importance of profit, growth, and fun. And his thesis was, if you have profitability, if you have growth, if people are having fun, the stakeholders are enjoying, employees are enjoying working there, the customers are enjoying the experience of doing business with you, then all of that combines and creates security. And it's an interesting thesis that the way that you get long-term sustainability and security in a business is by managing those input variables: profit, growth, and fun.
Well, right, which comes, everything comes back to how you make decisions and how you manage people and humility in many cases. But do you have a name of the book yet?
We
might
have
not.
A working title, but it's actually going to be P plus G plus F equals S. That's the equation.
Well, you'll have to keep us posted on that. I think from a marketing perspective, the things that people can do to overcome some of these issues, might be, for example, it's really sharing your knowledge and sharing your expertise pretty freely. And, that really, I think, is the trick. They say publish or perish, but I think that's true. I think the more that you give, the more you end up getting.
That's absolutely correct. We have hundreds of articles that we have written and published and shared on LinkedIn, on Medium, on our own website, blog. And we're not shy about saying, look, here's what we've done. This is the kind of experience we have. This is what we think about this particular topic. And even when I say this all the time, there are many clients that are not a fit for us for whatever reason. They may be too small. Maybe our capabilities don't necessarily align with what they need. But I will always have the conversation to try to help somebody, because I am a believer in universal karma and doing the best for other people without any expectation of return. And I've lived my whole life that way, and our firm has managed its operations that way since the beginning. And it's always been about, what can I do to help? What can I do to listen? And sometimes, honestly, the best thing that a person needs, maybe it's an entrepreneur, maybe it's an experienced CEO, they just need somebody to talk with and exchange ideas with. And that's okay.
Loneliest job in the world. Loneliest job, except maybe some lighthouse operator, out on in New Hampshire. I don't know.
That's a good point.
But I appreciate it. I think that's really one of the secrets of how one thing to look at in who you're working with, and I say this purely out of selfishness, take a look at how long they've been doing it, right? You don't last in this business if you don't actually, like, I'm going to guess, let me just guess, I bet you have a system to do that discovery so that you can do that quickly and painlessly and get to the execution and fix the problem.
Well, we have
Would I be?
numerous systems, but I can share one sort of anecdotal thing with you. So this was a company we worked on a few years back, and they were having a lot of internal strife in the management group. They had 2 owners and 3 C-level executives. And after collecting some information, I put together a survey, and I asked them 50 questions about the business, and their responses were blind. And then I took their responses and presented them in an overhead, or well, PowerPoint, and the
Overhead.
overhead. I know.
Go ahead.
That's
I'm teasing.
it's a higher education term, you know.
Yes.
So long story short, we presented the results or the answers to the 50 questions on the board or on the screen without attribution. So they didn't know who said what. And
Right.
it was evident by about slide 5 that this company was very disparate. They were in 5 or 6 different directions. And at some point, one of the C-level people had raised his hand and said, well, we definitely want to see the rest of the answers, but it's very clear, even early on in this presentation, that we are not on the same page. And that internal alignment is one thing, but even if they are internally aligned, it doesn't mean it's right. It just means they're in agreement internally. But what's more important, actually, is the alignment to the expectations of the external stakeholders, whether they be, and that's a mix, right? That's kind of a wide dartboard. It's
Well, what a great
regulators, it's customers, it's vendors, it's supply chain, it's again distributors. It could be anywhere. Employees.
what a great
So,
example of your value in that equation, in that you knew enough to, first of all, you're using research methodology, making that research anonymous. There's a whole bunch of knowledge and skill and experience in there that actually created that outcome. So that I think you can give yourself credit for. But of course, the client has to execute. I appreciate you being with us. It looks like we're out of time. We try to not take too much time, but it's been a half hour. It seems like it went by in about 4 seconds. But thank you for doing this.
thank you for having me,
And
Pete.
if
I really appreciate the opportunity to connect today. And again, we're here if we can help anybody in their business, large or small. That's what we do.
we'll put a link down in the down below, and hang on here after we go. And thanks for joining us. So just stay on the
Thank you.
line if you don't mind.
We'll do.